Don't bring that loud black attitude into my school. You people need to learn your place. Ethan's voice sliced through the courtyard as he stood beside his father, Officer Hayes, who was already yanking Ava's wrist into the cuffs. Make it tighter, Dad. She needs to feel it. Ethan smirked. The officer shoved her forward, forcing her to stumble while students backed away, unsure whether to watch or flee. Troublemakers like you don't belong here, he muttered, gripping her shoulder with practiced force. Ava's sapphire scarf shook with each breath, but her resolve stayed unbroken. Ethan had no idea he was threatening the daughter of the one judge who could end his family's power with a single ruling. Before continuing, comment where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you can't miss. Through Brentwood High's glass doors, morning sunlight streamed into the main hallway. Ava Johnson took a deep breath, adjusting the strap of her canvas satchel as she studied the crisp schedule in her hands. The corridor buzzed with typical high school energy. Lockers clanging, sneakers squeaking on polished floors, voices echoing off pale walls covered in college prep posters and sports team photos. She felt the stares immediately. Curious glances darted her way as students huddled in their usual groups, whispering behind cupped hands. Ava kept her chin up, her stride purposeful. She'd been the new girl before. This was just another school, another fresh start. The schedule showed her first class was AP Literature in room 312. The hallway curved left toward the academic wing. Ava checked the room numbers as she walked. 308, 310. She was so focused on finding her classroom that she didn't see him coming until it was too late. The impact was jarring, a deliberate shoulder check that sent Ava stumbling sideways. Her books and papers scattered across the floor as several students gasped. The hallway fell eerily silent. Ava looked up to find a tall senior sneering down at her. Ethan Hayes planted his feet wide, crossing his arms as he towered over her fallen belongings. His Letterman jacket stretched across broad shoulders, and a cruel smile played at the corners of his mouth. "Watch where you're going," he spat, making no move to help. Other students pressed themselves against the lockers, eyes wide but mouths shut. Ava took a slow breath, refusing to let him see any reaction. She knelt carefully, gathering her things with deliberate calm. "You bumped into me on purpose," she stated matter-of-factly, her voice carrying in the tense silence. Ethan's smirk twisted into something uglier. "Looks like somebody doesn't know their place around here." He kicked one of her notebooks further down the hall. "This isn't your neighborhood, princess. Brentwood has standards." The racial undertone in his words was unmistakable. Ava's hand tightened on the strap of her bag, but she kept her expression neutral as she stood. With smooth movements, she pulled out her phone and hit record. "I suggest you back off," she said evenly, holding the camera steady, "unless you want to explain your behavior to the administration." Ethan's face flushed red when he spotted the phone. Several students had their own devices out now, too, filming the confrontation. This clearly wasn't going according to his usual script. "You think you're clever?" he snarled, taking an aggressive step forward. But Ava didn't flinch. She kept recording, meeting his glare with unwavering calm. "I think you should be more careful about assaulting other students," she replied. "The evidence speaks for itself." Whispers rippled through the gathering crowd. No one had ever stood up to Ethan Hayes like this before. His status as the untouchable king of Brentwood was cracking in real time. "You're going to regret this," he spat, jabbing a finger toward her face. "You have no idea who you're messing with." Ava lowered her phone but kept it ready. "I know exactly who I'm dealing with. A coward who relies on intimidation because he has nothing else to offer." The words landed like a physical blow. Ethan's face contorted with rage, but the bell rang before he could respond. Students began hurrying to class, though many lingered to watch the drama unfold. "This isn't over," Ethan growled, before storming away, shoving younger students aside as he went. Ava gathered her remaining papers, her hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her. A few brave students gave her subtle nods of approval as they passed. The day crawled by in a haze of new teachers, introductions, and sidelong glances. Ava felt Ethan's predatory stares from across classrooms and cafeteria tables. He was watching, waiting, plotting his revenge. When the final bell rang, Ava headed to her assigned locker to gather her things. She immediately noticed something was wrong. The lock had been tampered with. The metal scratched around the dial. She tried her combination, but the mechanism stuck. Opening her phone, she documented the damage, adding it to her growing collection of evidence. She'd need to report this to the office, though she had little hope they'd take action. If this was how Ethan operated, he clearly had protection from somewhere. The next day, Ava's muscles tensed as she approached the cafeteria for lunch. She'd packed her own food, wanting to avoid the lunch line drama. But as she neared the double doors, a familiar figure stepped into her path. Ethan leaned against the wall with exaggerated casualness, his smirk promising trouble. He'd positioned himself perfectly, just out of view of the security cameras, in a spot where teachers rarely patrolled during lunch hour. "Going somewhere?" he asked, voice dripping with false sweetness. His eyes gleamed with malicious anticipation, clearly ready to escalate their conflict. Ava's heartbeat quickened, but she kept her expression neutral as she faced her tormentor. The hallway seemed to shrink around them as other students slowed to watch, sensing the brewing confrontation. This was exactly what Ethan wanted, an audience for whatever he had planned next. Ava stepped into the sun-filled courtyard, carefully balancing her lunch tray. Metal tables dotted the concrete space where clusters of students gathered, their chatter filling the warm afternoon air. She scanned for an empty spot, preferably somewhere visible to teachers and security cameras. A hush fell over the nearest tables as she passed. Students pretended not to stare, but their sideways glances followed her movement. Word of her morning confrontation with Ethan had spread fast. Some looked impressed, others worried, but most seemed afraid to be associated with her. "Hey, new girl!" Ethan's voice boomed across the courtyard. He pushed away from his usual table where his friends lounged in their matching Letterman jackets. "Think you're pretty smart with that phone of yours, don't you?" Ava kept walking, her grip tightening on her tray. She'd chosen her lunch carefully, a sandwich, apple, and water bottle. Nothing that could make too much mess if things went wrong. She'd learned that lesson at her last school. "I'm talking to you." Ethan's footsteps quickened behind her. Students shifted in their seats, phones appearing in hands as they sensed drama building. "You can't just go around filming people without permission. That's illegal." Ava turned slowly, keeping her voice steady. "Recording someone who's harassing you is perfectly legal in public spaces. Maybe you should check the law before you try to quote it." The courtyard fell silent, except for the soft clicks of phone cameras. Ethan's face reddened as he stalked closer, deliberately invading her personal space. "You think you're so smart, coming here, acting like you own the place?" "I think I have the right to attend school without being assaulted," Ava replied calmly. She noticed several teachers at the cafeteria windows, watching but not intervening. Their inaction spoke volumes about how things worked at Brentwood. "Assaulted?" Ethan laughed, but his eyes were cold. "Nobody touched you, but girls like you always play victim, don't you? Always looking for attention, trying to cause trouble where you don't belong." The racial undertone in his words made several students shift uncomfortably. Ava felt heat rising in her chest, but kept her expression neutral. "The only one causing trouble is you, Ethan, and I have the evidence to prove it." "Evidence?" His hand shot out suddenly, knocking her tray upward. Ava jumped back, but her lunch scattered across the concrete. Her water bottle burst open, spraying across her shoes. Gasps rippled through the watching crowd. "Oops," Ethan sneered, stepping closer. "Guess you should watch where you're going, again." Ava's heart pounded, but she stood her ground. "That's another incident I'll be reporting, along with the racist comments and the vandalism to my locker." "Reporting?" Ethan's face twisted with rage. "You think anyone here cares what you have to say?" He gestured wildly at the scattered food. "Look what you did. You attacked me with that tray." Ava blinked in confusion as Ethan suddenly clutched his arm, making a show of checking for injuries. "Everyone saw you," he shouted, voice echoing off the courtyard walls. "You tried to hit me. I could have been seriously hurt." The performance was so absurd that Ava almost laughed, but the desperate fury in Ethan's eyes stopped her. He was building a narrative, and the realization of why hit her like ice water. "There are dozens of witnesses," she said firmly, pointing to the sea of phones recording them. "Everyone can see what really happened." "Oh yeah," Ethan backed away, pulling out his own phone. His fingers shook with anger as he dialed. We'll see what happens when someone with actual authority gets involved. Ava's stomach dropped as she heard his next words. Dad, you need to come to school right now. That new girl, she just attacked me in front of everyone. She tried to hit me with her lunch tray. I think she might be dangerous. The gathered students exchanged worried looks. Many knew Ethan's father was a police officer, and from their expressions, this wasn't the first time Ethan had weaponized that connection. She's been harassing me all day, Ethan continued into the phone, voice trembling with fake distress. Recording me without permission, following me around. And now this. You need to do something. Ava stood perfectly still, her wet shoes leaving marks on the concrete. She could run. Part of her screamed to get out of there, but running would only make her look guilty. Instead, she pulled out her own phone and began documenting everything, speaking clearly for her recording. Ethan Hayes just assaulted me by knocking my lunch tray from my hands, she stated. Now he's making false accusations and calling his father, Officer Hayes, to intimidate me. Multiple students are recording this incident. Ethan's eyes flashed with hatred as he heard her words. She's threatening me right now, he yelled into his phone. Hurry, Dad, before she does something worse. The courtyard had become a forest of raised phones. Every student determined to capture what was happening. Ava heard whispers of, "This isn't right," and someone should get the principal. But no one moved to help. In the distance, faint but growing louder, came the unmistakable wail of police sirens. Ava's heart raced, but she kept her phone steady, refusing to show fear. She'd seen this tactic before. Bullies using authority figures as weapons, twisting the truth to maintain their power. The sirens grew closer, their howl bouncing off the school buildings. Students shifted nervously, but their phones stayed trained on the scene. Ethan's smirk returned as he pocketed his phone, clearly believing victory was minutes away. Ava took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was coming. The sirens screamed closer, and she could hear tires squealing in the parking lot, but she wouldn't run and she wouldn't back down. She had truth and evidence on her side. She just hoped it would be enough. The heavy double doors of Brentwood High burst open as Officer Ray Hayes stormed through them, his boots thundering against the linoleum floor. His police uniform was crisp, badge gleaming, and his face burned with self-righteous anger. Students scattered from his path like leaves in a windstorm. "Where is she?" he bellowed, making several freshmen jump. His hand rested purposefully on his utility belt as he marched down the main hallway. Principal Thorne emerged from her office, Power walking to intercept him. "Officer Hayes, we need to discuss this situation properly. My son was attacked." Ray cut her off, shouldering past. "I'm handling this now." The principal's heels clicked rapidly as she tried to keep pace. "Please, there are procedures we need to follow." But Ray had already spotted Ava in the courtyard, still standing exactly where she'd been during Ethan's performance. Her phone was raised, recording everything. The sight of it made Ray's jaw clench. "Put your hands where I can see them," he shouted, charging toward her with the full authority of his badge. Students scrambled out of his way, forming a wide circle around the scene. Ava slowly raised both hands, her movements deliberate and calm. "Officer, I'd like to explain what actually happened." "Shut your mouth." Ray grabbed her right arm roughly, twisting it behind her back with unnecessary force. Ava gasped in pain, but didn't resist. "Dad, she tried to hit me with her tray," Ethan called out, playing up his victim role. Everyone saw it. Several students started shouting at once. "That's not what happened. He's lying. She didn't do anything wrong." "Quiet," Ray roared, silencing them all. He yanked Ava's other arm back, making her wince as he snapped the handcuffs around her wrists. The metal clicked shut with a sound that echoed across the stunned courtyard. "Officer Hayes," Principal Thorne tried again, her voice shaking. "This student hasn't shown any violent behavior. We should discuss this in my office, Suarez." "She assaulted my son," Ray growled, tightening the cuffs until Ava had to bite her lip to keep from crying out. "That makes her dangerous." "What's the charge?" Ava asked steadily, despite the pain in her shoulders. "You have to tell me why I'm being arrested." Ray gave the cuffs another sharp tug. "Assault, disorderly conduct, resisting arrest." I'm not resisting, Ava pointed out, her voice carrying across the dead, silent courtyard. And there's no evidence of assault. Multiple videos show what really happened. Delete those videos, Ray barked at the surrounding students who clutched their phones tighter, or I'll confiscate them as evidence. You can't do that, Ava said clearly, making sure the nearest phones could pick up her words. That would be illegal seizure without probable cause or a warrant. Ray's face darkened at her knowledge of the law. He grabbed her upper arm hard enough to bruise and started marching her toward the parking lot. Ava kept her head high as she was paraded across campus past hundreds of staring faces. The whispers followed them. This is so wrong. Someone should stop this. Poor girl. I got it all on video. Ethan trailed behind them, phone raised triumphantly as he recorded Ava's walk of shame. His smirk grew with each step, clearly savoring every moment of her humiliation. Principal Thorne hurried alongside them, still protesting weakly. Officer, we need to contact her parents first. This isn't proper procedure. I'm the procedure now, Ray snapped. This girl needs to learn about consequences. They reached his squad car where Ray roughly pushed Ava into the back seat. She had to twist awkwardly to avoid falling with her hands cuffed behind her. The door slammed shut with finality. Through the window, Ava could see dozens of phones still recording. Principal Thorne stood wringing her hands, looking lost. And there was Ethan, pressing close to the glass with his own phone, drinking in her distress with obvious satisfaction. Ava forced herself to take slow, steady breaths. The handcuffs bit into her wrists, but she refused to show pain. She knew what would happen next. They would have to contact her mother. A small part of her wanted to smile, imagining the look on their faces when they realized who they were dealing with. But for now, she kept her expression neutral. Ray climbed into the driver's seat, adjusting his mirror to glare at her. Think you're clever, causing trouble at school? We'll see how smart you feel after a night in holding. I know my rights, Ava replied calmly, and I know every second of this illegal arrest is being documented. Ray's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel as he pulled away from the curb. Students pressed against the school windows, watching the squad car leave. Ava caught a final glimpse of Ethan waving mockingly before they turned onto the main road. The drive to the station was tense and silent. Ava focused on memorizing every detail, the route, every word spoken. Her shoulders ached from the awkward position, but she sat perfectly still, giving Ray no excuse to claim she was uncooperative. They pulled into the station parking lot where Ray yanked her out of the car with the same unnecessary roughness. He marched her through a side entrance, past several officers who barely glanced up from their desks. Sit, he ordered, shoving her into a hard plastic chair next to his desk. Don't move. Ava, why? Ava watched as Ray dropped heavily into his chair and pulled out an arrest form. His pen scratched across the paper as he filled in the basic details with angry strokes. Name, age, school. Then he reached the line for parent/guardian information. His pen hesitated. Ava saw his eyes narrow as he read her last name again, more carefully this time. Ray's pen hovered over the form, his confidence wavering as he read the name Johnson again. A cold sweat broke out on his forehead and something about that name. Officer David Turner appeared suddenly at his desk, face tight with concern. He leaned down and whispered urgently, Sir, Judge Johnson is on her way. That's her daughter. The pen slipped from Ray's fingers, clattering onto his desk. The color drained from his face as the full weight of his actions crashed down on him. He just arrested a judge's daughter, not just any judge, Eleanor Johnson, whose reputation for fierce justice was legendary in their district. What did you say? Ray's voice came out hoarse. Judge Johnson called the front desk directly. David continued, his words rushed and nervous. She'll be here in 10 minutes. She's furious, sir. Ray shot up from his chair, nearly knocking it over. Through the glass partition, he could see Ava sitting calmly in the holding room, hands still cuffed behind her back. She met his panicked gaze steadily, and he suddenly realized she'd known all along what was coming. The station erupted into anxious activity. Officers who had ignored the situation minutes ago were now huddled in whispered conversations, shooting worried glances toward the holding room. Ray paced, running his hands through his hair, trying to figure out how to justify his actions. "Should I remove her handcuffs, sir?" David asked quietly. "No," Ray snapped, then lowered his voice. "No, she was arrested properly. We're doing this by the book." But his words sounded hollow even to himself. There had been nothing by the book about storming into a school and arresting a minor without cause, without proper procedure, without even speaking to school administrators. Suddenly, the station's front doors swung open with decisive force. Judge Eleanor Johnson strode in, her heels striking the floor like hammer blows. She wore a charcoal suit that radiated authority, and her expression could have frozen fire. The room fell silent. Ray straightened his uniform and stepped forward, trying to project confidence he no longer felt. "Judge Johnson, I can explain. Where is my daughter?" Her voice cut through his words like a blade. "Ma'am, there was an incident at the school." "Officer Hayes," she interrupted, each word precisely measured. "I asked you a simple question. Where is my daughter?" Ray gestured weakly toward the holding room. Judge Johnson brushed past him without another glance, her displeasure radiating off her in waves. David hurried to unlock the holding room door. Ava looked up as her mother entered. Despite the handcuffs and the humiliation she'd endured, she sat with perfect posture, chin raised. "Are you hurt?" Judge Johnson asked, examining her daughter carefully. "The cuffs are too tight," Ava answered calmly, and Officer Hayes used excessive force during the arrest. Multiple students recorded everything. Judge Johnson turned to David. "Remove those handcuffs now." David fumbled with the keys, his hands shaking slightly as he unlocked the restraints. Ava brought her arms forward slowly, rotating her shoulders to ease the stiffness. Angry red marks circled her wrists where the cuffs had bitten into her skin. Judge Johnson's eyes narrowed at the sight. "Tell me everything." Ava recounted the events clearly and precisely. Ethan's initial harassment, his escalating behavior, the staged confrontation in the courtyard, and Ray's dramatic arrival. She described how he'd ignored the principal's protests and the witnesses who tried to speak up. Other officers had gathered near the holding room listening. Several shifted uncomfortably as Ava detailed Ray's conduct. The illegal threats about confiscating phones, the excessive force, the fabricated charges. "We have it all on video," Ava finished. "Multiple angles, and the school security cameras should have captured everything too." Judge Johnson placed a gentle hand on her daughter's shoulder. "You did exactly right," she said softly. Then she turned to face Ray, who stood rigid in the doorway. Her voice hardened. "Officer Hayes, you will provide me with every document related to this incident, every form, every note, every second of body camera footage. Is that clear?" "Judge Johnson, you have to understand." "What I understand," she cut in, "is that you abused your authority to terrorize a minor. You violated procedure, ignored witnesses, fabricated charges, and used excessive force, all to satisfy your son's vendetta. That is what I understand." The station had grown so quiet you could hear the hum of the fluorescent lights. Ray's face had turned an unhealthy shade of gray. "Ava," Judge Johnson said, her tone softening as she turned back to her daughter, "we're leaving now, but I promise you, we will handle this properly, legally, thoroughly. No one is above the law, especially those sworn to uphold it." Ava stood, gathering her belongings that had been tossed on a nearby desk. As they walked through the station, officers stepped back, avoiding eye contact. Only David met Ava's gaze, giving her a small nod of acknowledgement. "This isn't over," Ray called out, a desperate edge to his voice. "There was still an assault." "Officer Hayes," Judge Johnson said without turning around, "I strongly suggest you stop talking and contact your union representative. You're going to need one." They reached the station doors. Ava felt a profound sense of relief as they stepped into the sunlight. Her mother's steady presence beside her promised justice, not through force or intimidation, but through the proper channels of law. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. Ava pulled it out, expecting a message from one of the witnesses at school. Instead, she saw an unknown number. The text message was brief but clear. "Drop this, or it gets worse." Ava sat at the kitchen table with her mother, surrounded by complaint forms and legal documents. The evening light cast long shadows across the papers as they methodically worked through each section. Judge Johnson's reading glasses perched on her nose as she reviewed Ava's statement for the third time. "We need to be precise here," Judge Johnson said, tapping a paragraph with her pen. "When Officer Hayes first approached you, what exactly were his words?" Aviva closed her eyes, replaying the moment. "He said to stand up. You're under arrest. When I asked why, he said I was dangerous and threatening students. Then he grabbed my arm before I could even respond." Judge Johnson made a note, her jaw tightening. "And the school principal, Mr. Thorne, he attempted to intervene?" "Yes, he kept saying, 'Officer, this isn't necessary, and we should discuss this in my office.' But Officer Hayes just shouted him down." Their conversation was interrupted by the evening news blaring from the living room TV. Ava's heart jumped when she saw the shaky cell phone footage of her arrest playing on screen. "Breaking news tonight," the anchor announced. "Controversy erupts at Brentwood High School after a police officer arrested a student in what witnesses call an excessive use of force. The incident, captured on multiple phones, shows Officer Ray Hayes aggressively handcuffing 17-year-old Ava Johnson, daughter of State Judge Eleanor Johnson. The footage showed Ava being roughly handled while students screamed in the background. The station cut to interviews with shocked parents and community members. "That's not right," one mother said, shaking her head. "You can't treat children like that. Badge or no badge." Iva's phone buzzed with messages from classmates sharing links to more news coverage. The story was spreading rapidly across social media with thousands of shares and angry comments. "Look at this," Ava said, showing her mother a new email from the superintendent's office. "They're suspending Ethan pending investigation." Judge Johnson read the message carefully. "And Ray Hayes, administrative leave," Ava confirmed, pulling up another article. "Effective immediately." For a moment, they allowed themselves to feel cautiously optimistic. The system appeared to be responding appropriately, but their hope was short-lived. Judge Johnson's phone rang, a colleague from the courthouse. She put it on speaker. "Eleanor, have you seen the police union statement? They're pushing back hard." Ava quickly found the statement online and read it aloud. "The Brentwood Police Union stands firmly behind Officer Hayes' professional judgment in addressing a volatile situation involving a combative student who posed an immediate threat to school safety. We reject any attempts to politicize standard police procedure." "They're lying," Ava's voice cracked with disbelief. "Everyone saw what happened." "Of course they are," Judge Johnson said grimly. "And watch, others will follow their lead." As if on cue, Ava's phone lit up with a notification from the school board. Their statement was carefully worded, but clear in its implications. "We take all allegations seriously and will conduct a thorough internal review of the incident, including any actions that may have provoked the response." "They're trying to blame me," Ava said quietly, "after everything everyone saw." Judge Johnson reached across the table and squeezed her daughter's hand. "This is how the system protects itself. First, they deny, then they deflect, then they discredit." Ava's phone buzzed again. Another anonymous message. "Back off now, final warning." She showed it to her mother, who photographed the screen for evidence. They'd received 3 similar messages since leaving the police station. "The teachers who saw everything," Ava said slowly. "They're all going quiet too. Mrs. Miller actually turned and walked the other way when she saw me after school today. She watched the whole thing happen." Clear his throat. "People are afraid," Judge Johnson explained. "Their jobs, their relationships, their standing in the community. They worry it's all at risk if they speak up." Ava's phone kept lighting up with messages, but now they were from her mother's courthouse colleagues. The messages were sympathetic, but carried clear warnings. "Maybe let this one go, Eleanor. Think about your career. These situations are best handled quietly. You don't want to make enemies of the whole department." Judge Johnson read them without expression, but Ava saw her mother's hands tighten around her coffee mug. "They're all part of it," Ava realized. "The police, the school, even the courts, they're all connected. They protect each other." "Yes," her mother agreed. "That's exactly what we're up against. This isn't just about Ethan anymore, or even Officer Hayes. We're challenging an entire system that's designed to protect its own." Iva stood up and began pacing the kitchen. "So what do we do? Give up?" Judge Johnson removed her reading glasses and fixed Ava with an intense stare. No, we fight smarter. We document everything. We build our case methodically. We find the weak points in their armor. But they're trying to scare us, Ava said, holding up her phone with its threatening messages. Because they're afraid, Judge Johnson replied. They know we have the truth on our side. They know we have evidence, and they know I understand exactly how to use the law to hold them accountable. Ava nodded slowly, drawing strength from her mother's determination. She returned to the table and picked up her statement again. Then let's make sure every word is perfect. They worked late into the night reviewing documents, organizing evidence, and planning their next steps. When Ava finally went to bed, she felt more resolved than ever. The system might be powerful, but it wasn't invincible. The next morning, Ava walked into school with her head held high, but as she turned the corner toward her locker, she stopped short. Her heart pounded as she stared at the cruel words scrolled across the metal in thick black marker. Racial slurs mixed with threats. Students passing by quickly averted their eyes, hurrying past without speaking. Ava stood frozen in the hallway, her eyes fixed on the hateful words defacing her locker. Early morning sunlight streamed through the windows, making the black marker glisten mockingly. A few other early arrivals walked past, their footsteps quickening as they noticed her standing there. She pulled out her phone and carefully photographed the vandalism from multiple angles, making sure to capture every cruel word and threat. Her hands trembled slightly, but her face remained composed. Principal Thorne approached, his dress shoes clicking against the linoleum. Miss Johnson, I am so sorry about this. Our maintenance staff will clean it immediately. Has anyone checked the security cameras? Ava asked, not looking away from her locker. Thorne shifted uncomfortably. Unfortunately, the hallway camera in this section has been experiencing technical difficulties. Since when? Ava's voice was steady. Since yesterday afternoon, apparently. He wouldn't meet her eyes. How convenient, Ava said quietly, continuing to document the vandalism. Now, Miss Johnson, I understand you're upset, but let's not jump to conclusions about what, Principal Thorne? About who did this? About why the camera suddenly stopped working? About why no one saw anything? Ava finally turned to face him. Or about why you're more concerned with damage control than actually addressing the problem? Vice Principal Adams hurried up, clutching a clipboard. We take these incidents very seriously, she said, her voice dripping with rehearsed sympathy. We'll conduct a thorough investigation. Like the thorough investigation into Ethan's harassment? Ava asked. Adams pursed her lips. That matter is being handled through appropriate channels. Down the hall, Ava spotted 3 of Ethan's friends watching the scene unfold. They weren't even trying to hide their smirks. One of them, Chris Miller, made a show of taking out his phone and pretending to film her. Ava opened her bag and pulled out a small notebook. In clear view of the administrators, she wrote down the date, time, and exactly what she observed, including the names of students present and the administrators' responses. What are you doing? Adams asked sharply. Documenting everything, Ava replied calmly, just like my mother suggested. The mention of Judge Johnson made both administrators stiffen. There's no need for that, Thorne said quickly. We assure you this will be addressed. I'm sure it will, Ava said, continuing to write. And now there will be a record of exactly how it was addressed. Throughout the day, Ava methodically recorded every incident, the whispered threats as she walked between classes, the teachers who suddenly couldn't meet her eyes, the way Ethan's friends accidentally bumped her desk in shared classes. She noted names, times, and witnesses. After school, she met her mother at the courthouse. Judge Johnson reviewed Ava's notes with a grim expression before adding them to a growing file of complaints. They're stonewalling us, Judge Johnson said, showing Ava an email from the police department claiming they needed more time to process their records request. The school board is doing the same thing. Delayed responses, missing paperwork, convenient technical issues. They're hoping we'll give up, Ava said. They don't know us very well then, do they? Her mother's smile was fierce. Later that evening, they drove to the grocery store, discussing strategy as they shopped. On the way home, Ava noticed headlights in the rearview mirror. Mom, she said quietly, that black sedan has been behind us for 6 blocks. Judge Johnson checked the mirror. I see it, let's be sure. She took a series of random turns through residential streets. The car stayed with them. Could be coincidence, she said, though her knuckles were white on the steering wheel. She turned right at the next intersection, then immediately right again. The sedan followed. Call 911, Ava suggested, and report it to whom? Officer Hayes's colleagues. Judge Johnson shook her head. No, we handle this ourselves. She accelerated slightly, then turned suddenly into a shopping center, cutting through the parking lot and emerging on a different street. The sedan appeared moments later. Take a video, Judge Johnson instructed. Get the license plate if you can. Ava held her phone steady, filming as her mother executed a complex series of turns that finally lost their tail. They took a lengthy detour before heading home, checking repeatedly to ensure they weren't followed again. Inside the house, Ava's hands were shaking as she uploaded the video to their evidence folder. They're watching us, she said. Yes, her mother agreed. They're trying to scare us into backing down. She studied Ava's face. Are you afraid? Ava considered the question carefully. Yes, she admitted, but I'm more angry than scared. They think they can just get away with everything, that no one will stand up to them. Then we keep fighting, Judge Johnson said firmly. We document everything. We build our case. We don't let them intimidate us into silence. I won't, Ava promised. She sat down at her laptop and began uploading the day's evidence. Photos of her vandalized locker, her detailed notes, and several videos students had secretly shared with her showing Ethan's harassment. One clip clearly showed him shoving a freshman into a wall while his friends laughed. Another captured him making racist comments to a group of younger students. Ava carefully saved each file to their secure cloud drive, making multiple backups. Her phone buzzed with a new message from a blocked number. You're making enemies. Ava took a screenshot of the threat and added it to their evidence folder. Then she straightened her shoulders and kept working. They could threaten all they wanted. She wasn't going to stop until justice was served. Ava felt the stares before she even reached the school entrance. Students huddled in small groups, phones out, whispering as she passed. The viral video of her arrest had exploded overnight. Millions of views, thousands of shares, endless comments debating what happened. News vans lined the street, reporters clutching microphones as they tried to catch arriving students for interviews. Camera flashes sparked like lightning. Ava kept her head high, walking steadily through the chaos. Ava, can we get a statement about the arrest? What do you say to allegations that you provoked the incident? She pushed through the media scrum without responding, just as her mother had advised. Inside, the tension was even thicker. Posters supporting Officer Hayes plastered some lockers. Back the blue and support our police messages. That felt more like threats than solidarity. There she is, the girl trying to destroy a good man's life. A parent volunteer sneered as Ava passed the front office. The woman wore a blue ribbon pinned to her chest. But then an unexpected voice spoke up behind her. A good man doesn't arrest innocent kids. Ava turned to see Mrs. Santos, one of the cafeteria workers. The older woman gave her a subtle nod before hurrying away. Throughout the morning, Ava received furtive shows of support. A sophomore slipped her a note, "Thank you for being brave." A junior who had filmed the arrest quietly shared more footage with her. Even some teachers gave her encouraging looks when no one else was watching. But the opposition was louder, more aggressive. Between second and third period, she overheard a group of parents in the hallway. It's ridiculous. Officer Hayes has served this community for 20 years. These people move in and start causing trouble right away. My husband says she was resisting arrest. Ava documented every comment, every hostile look. She'd learned to keep her phone recording in her pocket, capturing the constant stream of harassment. The biggest shock came during lunch. Ava was heading to the library when she spotted a familiar figure swaggering down the main hall. Ethan Hayes himself, surrounded by his usual gang of followers. She froze. He was supposed to be suspended, but there he was, acting like he owned the place. Assistant Principal Adams walked right past him without a word. Other teachers suddenly found reasons to look at their phones or shuffle papers. Ethan caught her eye and smirked, making a show of checking his phone, probably sending another anonymous threat. Ava turned and headed for the gym, hoping to cut through to the library the back way. She was halfway up the stairwell when she heard footsteps behind her. Hey, troublemaker, Ethan's voice echoed in the enclosed space. No cameras here to protect you now. Ava's heart raced, but she kept climbing steadily. She had her phone recording in her pocket as always. I'm talking to you. His footsteps quickened. You think you can just walk away? She reached the landing and turned to face him, keeping her distance. Leave me alone, Ethan. You're not even supposed to be in school. He laughed. Yeah, who's going to stop me? The teachers? The principal? He took another step closer. Your mom, the judge? Back off. Ava's voice was firm despite her pounding heart. Or what? You'll get me arrested? His face twisted with rage. Give me that phone. I know you're recording. He lunged forward, grabbing for her pocket. Ava jerked away, but he had her cornered against the railing. I said, give it to me. His fingers clawed at her jacket. Ava ducked under his arm and sprinted down the stairs, not stopping until she reached the main office. She reported the incident immediately, still shaking. Principal Thorne sighed heavily. Ms. Johnson, without witnesses or evidence. I have a recording, Ava said, pulling out her phone. Unauthorized recording on school grounds is against policy, Adams cut in smoothly. And Mr. Hayes denies being on campus today. So you're just going to ignore this again? Ava stared at them in disbelief. We'll look into it, Thorne said wearily. That's all we can do. The rest of the day was a powder keg. Students picked sides openly now, some wearing blue ribbons like the parents, others quietly showing support with small violet ribbons that had started appearing. The two groups glared at each other in hallways. Whispered arguments broke out in classrooms. After school, Ava met her mother at a small cafe far from their usual spots. Judge Johnson wasn't alone. A sharp-eyed woman in a crisp suit sat with her. Ava, this is Maria Sanchez from the Civil Rights Legal Defense Fund, her mother said. She's going to help us fight this properly. Ms. Sanchez smiled. I've reviewed your evidence so far. Very thorough documentation. That will help immensely, but we need to move quickly. They're already trying to control the narrative. She showed them news clips where the police union spokesman defended Officer Hayes, painting him as a dedicated public servant being persecuted. Other coverage questioned Ava's attitude and suggested she had provoked the incident. They're trying to drown out the truth with their own version, Ms. Sanchez explained. But we have something they don't, solid evidence, and more keeps coming in. She pulled out her tablet, showing messages from other students and parents describing similar incidents of harassment and intimidation by both Ethan and his father. You've inspired people to speak up, she told Ava. They're not afraid anymore. That night, Ava sat cross-legged on her bed, surrounded by printed screenshots, transcribed recordings, and witness statements. She carefully organized everything chronologically, building a clear picture of escalating harassment and institutional protection of the perpetrators. Her phone buzzed with another anonymous threat. Back off now or else. Ava added it to the evidence file without hesitation. They thought they could scare her into silence. They thought wrong. Every threat, every act of intimidation, every attempt to cover up the truth, it all just made her more determined to expose everything. Officer David Turner paced nervously in the courthouse hallway, checking his watch for the third time. The marble corridors felt empty and exposed at this late hour. Judge Johnson had arranged this private meeting carefully, away from prying eyes. When she appeared, her heels echoing against the floor, David straightened his uniform instinctively. Thank you for meeting me, Your Honor. She guided him into her chambers, closing the door firmly. Officer Turner, you said this was urgent. David's hands trembled slightly as he reached into his jacket. What I'm about to show you, I could lose my job, but I can't stay quiet anymore. He placed a small flash drive on her desk. It's about Ray Hayes' body cam footage from the arrest. The official story is that there were technical issues. That's why none of it was preserved. Judge Johnson's expression remained neutral, but her eyes sharpened. Go on. That's a lie. David swallowed hard. I work in tech services part-time. Ray came to me right after the arrest, ordered me to delete the footage. When I hesitated, he said it was a direct order from above. But you didn't delete everything, Judge Johnson observed, looking at the drive. David shook his head. I made copies first. I knew it was wrong what they were doing, The way they treated your daughter." He gestured at the drive. "It's all there, the full arrest, unedited, plus footage from the past month showing how Ray and Ethan have been targeting other students too." Judge Johnson picked up the drive carefully. "You understand the risk you're taking?" "Yes, ma'am." David stood straighter. "But someone has to stand up to them. The whole department's afraid of the Hayeses, has been for years. Ray acts like he's untouchable because of his father's connections. But what he did to Ava, it was assault, pure and simple." "Thank you, Officer Turner. Your courage won't be forgotten." She wrote something on a card. "This is my private number. If anyone retaliates against you, call immediately." After David left, Judge Johnson called Ava to her chambers. They sat together at her computer watching the footage in grim silence. The videos were damning. The body cam showed Ray storming onto campus, shoving past protesting staff members. It captured him grabbing Ava roughly despite her calm compliance, twisting her arms unnecessarily hard during cuffing. The audio picked up his muttered racial slurs, his aggressive commands, the way he ignored her polite request to explain the charges. But it was the earlier footage that truly revealed the pattern. Clips showed Ray intimidating other minority students during traffic stops. There was Ethan bragging to his father about putting people in their place, while Ray laughed approvingly. Most disturbing were the conversations between Ray and other officers, casually discussing how to handle complaints by making evidence disappear. Ava watched it all without flinching, though her hands clenched tight in her lap. They really thought they could just bury this. "They're not used to being challenged," Judge Johnson said softly. "That's why they're so desperate to silence you." Meanwhile, at school, the pressure continued mounting. Ethan had grown increasingly erratic, enraged that his usual tactics weren't working. Ava's quiet defiance infuriated him more than any direct confrontation could have. That morning, he kicked over a freshman's lunch tray when the boy refused to move from his table. In English class, he shouted down a student who disagreed with him during discussion. Between periods, he slammed lockers and shoved people aside, daring anyone to report him. "What are you looking at?" he snarled at a girl who glanced his way too long. She scurried away as his friends laughed, but fewer people were laughing now. Students who once feared him began avoiding him entirely. Even his usual followers seemed uncomfortable with his increasing volatility. During lunch, he spotted Ava sitting with a group of students wearing violet ribbons. The sight of them talking and laughing sent him into a rage. He stormed over, looming over their table. "You think this is funny?" he demanded. "You think ruining my dad's career is a joke?" Ava looked at him calmly. "Your dad ruined his own career by breaking the law." "Shut up!" Ethan slammed his hands on the table, making everyone jump. "You don't know anything. My family built this town. We protect people, but you come here causing trouble, turning everyone against us." "The only one causing trouble is you, Ethan," Ava said quietly, "and everyone can see it now." His face contorted. For a moment, it looked like he might strike her, but a teacher finally intervened, pulling him away as he continued shouting threats. Back in Judge Johnson's chambers, Ava and her mother began preparing for the misconduct hearing. They organized witness statements, documented threats, and now had the crucial body cam footage. Ava practiced her testimony, determined to remain composed no matter what. "Remember," Judge Johnson advised, "they'll try to provoke you to make you seem angry or unreasonable. Stay calm and stick to the facts." Ava nodded, reviewing her notes. "I'm ready. They need to face consequences, not just for what they did to me, but for everyone they've hurt." Judge Johnson squeezed her daughter's shoulder, proud of her strength. She officially scheduled the hearing for the following week, knowing it would send shockwaves through the community. The Hayeses had ruled through fear for too long. It was time for justice to be served. The notice went out that afternoon. Official misconduct hearing were Officer Ray Hayes. The machinery of accountability was finally turning. Ava felt a mix of anxiety and determination as she prepared to testify, knowing that speaking truth to power meant facing fierce resistance. But with irrefutable evidence in hand and growing support from others who'd been silenced, she was ready for the fight ahead. The morning sun painted golden streaks across Ava's living room as she sat with her mother, going over her testimony for the 100th time. Practice papers were spread across their coffee table, covered in highlighted notes and careful annotations. Let's try the part about the initial confrontation again, Judge Johnson suggested, her reading glasses perched on her nose. Remember, stick to observable facts. Ava nodded, straightening in her seat. On my first day at Brentwood High, Ethan Hayes deliberately collided with me in the hallway. When I didn't apologize, he used racial slurs and threatened me. I recorded his behavior on my phone to document the harassment. Good, clear, and specific, Judge Johnson made a note. Now, about Officer Hayes' arrival. Officer Hayes entered school grounds without checking in at the office. He ignored staff attempts to stop him. Without stating any charges or reading my rights, he grabbed my arm and twisted it behind my back. The handcuffs were applied with excessive force, causing bruising that was photographed at the station. Their doorbell rang, interrupting the practice session. Judge Johnson answered it to find Lucy Sanchez, one of Ava's classmates, nervously clutching a manila envelope. "I'm sorry to come so early," Lucy said quietly, "but I wanted to give you this before school." She handed over the envelope. "It's my written statement about what Ethan did to my brother last semester. 3 other students sign on statements too. They're all in here." Ava joined them at the door. "Thank you, Lucy. That's really brave of you." Lucy gave a small smile. "What you're doing, it's helping a lot of us feel stronger. Ethan made my brother's life hell when he reported the bullying. The school did nothing. But maybe now." Inside the envelope, they found detailed accounts of Ethan's pattern of intimidation. One student described how Ethan had destroyed his art project and threatened worse if he complained. Another wrote about Ethan demanding payment for protection from his friend's harassment. The local news had started shifting too. Last night's coverage included interviews with civil rights experts who criticized Ray's actions. The morning papers ran editorials questioning the school's handling of bullying reports. People were finally seeing the truth. At school, Ava noticed the change immediately. Students who had avoided eye contact now offered small waves or encouraging nods. During second period, a quiet sophomore named Ken slipped her a note. "My dad's on the force. Not all of them support Officer Hayes. Stay strong." In the cafeteria, something remarkable happened. As Ava walked to her usual table carrying her lunch tray, 4 students stood up and joined her. Without a word, they formed a protective circle, walking beside her. More students noticed and fell in line. By the time she reached her seat, nearly a dozen classmates had gathered in silent support. Ethan watched from across the room, his face darkening with rage. But for once, his glare held a hint of uncertainty. His usual crowd of followers had thinned considerably. Between classes, Ava's phone buzzed with a news alert. The school board had issued a statement. "We acknowledge concerns about our bullying response protocols and are committed to a full review of all policies. We extend our sincere regrets to any students who have felt unsafe or unheard." It wasn't a direct apology, but it was the first crack in the wall of institutional denial. Judge Johnson forwarded Ava an email confirmation. Ray's misconduct hearing was officially scheduled for next Wednesday at 9:00 a.m. "The dominoes are falling," her mother texted. "Stay focused. Stay strong." During last period, Ava's government teacher, Mr. Davies, pulled her aside. "I want you to know," he said quietly. "Many of us teachers felt sick about what happened. We were afraid to speak up, but I've submitted my witness statement about that day. It was wrong what they did to you." After school, Ava found a small group waiting by her locker. Not just Lucy, but 5 other students, including some she barely knew. They walked together to the parking lot, sharing stories of times they'd witnessed Ethan's cruelty, but felt powerless to stop it. "My cousin works at the courthouse," one girl mentioned. "She says your mom is the most respected judge there. No wonder Ethan's dad looked scared when he found out who you were." At home, Ava felt a surge of hope as she reviewed the day's developments. The witness statements were growing. Community support was building. Even the school board was backing down. For the first time since the arrest, justice felt truly possible. Judge Johnson spread the new statements across their dining room table, adding them to their evidence folders. "The truth has a way of coming out," she said, "especially when brave people stand together." Ava helped organize the documents, carefully labeling each one. "I think people were just waiting for someone to go first," she reflected. to show them it was possible to fight back. Later that evening, Ava gathered up the kitchen trash, heading out through the side door. The sunset painted the sky in fierce oranges and purples. She breathed in the cooling air, feeling stronger than she had in weeks. As she approached the garbage bins near their garage, a sharp chemical smell hit her nostrils. Her steps slowed. The odor was unmistakable. Gasoline. The garage erupted in flames, a violent orange glow piercing the dark evening sky. Ava stumbled backward, her heart pounding as the heat hit her face. The trash bag dropped from her trembling hands. "Mom!" she screamed, running back toward the house. "Call 911!" Judge Johnson burst through the door, phone already pressed to her ear. Neighbors emerged from their homes, some in pajamas, staring at the inferno consuming the Johnsons' garage. The fire crackled hungrily, consuming wood and metal, sending thick black smoke into the air. Sirens wailed in the distance as Ava and her mother stood on their front lawn, watching helplessly. The first fire truck arrived within minutes, firefighters jumping into action with practiced efficiency. Water hoses unleashed powerful streams, battling back the flames. "Did you see anyone?" Judge Johnson asked Ava quietly, her arm wrapped protectively around her daughter's shoulders. "No," Ava whispered, "but I smelled gasoline. Strong." Right before, two police cruisers pulled up, their lights casting eerie blue patterns across the gathered crowd. Ava recognized one of the officers as Ray Hayes' former partner. He barely glanced their way as he started taking notes. The fire was contained within 30 minutes, but the garage was destroyed. The acrid smell of burnt chemicals lingered in the air. As the smoke cleared, fire investigators moved in, examining the charred structure with flashlights. "Looks like an electrical malfunction," one investigator announced after barely 15 minutes of examination. "Probably faulty wiring in the outlet by the workbench." Judge Johnson stepped forward, her voice sharp. "There was gasoline. My daughter smelled it minutes before the fire started." The investigator shrugged. "Ma'am, we found no evidence of accelerants. The burn pattern clearly indicates an electrical origin." "You haven't even conducted a proper investigation," Judge Johnson argued. "This is clearly—" Judge Johnson, the officer who had ignored them earlier, cut in. "Given your current situation with the department, you might want to be careful about making unfounded accusations." Ava watched her mother's face harden. "Is that a threat, Officer Lewis?" "Just friendly advice," he replied with a cold smile. "We wouldn't want anyone thinking you're seeing conspiracies where none exist." The crowd of neighbors had grown, their whispered conversations carrying across the lawn. Some pointed at Ava, their expressions a mix of sympathy and suspicion. She caught fragments of their words, "causing so much trouble. Maybe if they just let it go." By midnight, the emergency vehicles were gone, leaving behind the skeleton of their garage and a profound sense of vulnerability. Neither Ava nor her mother slept much that night, jumping at every sound outside their windows. The morning brought fresh assault. Ava's phone buzzed with a news alert. Former sheriff speaks out. Judge's daughter's claims suspicious and politically motivated. The local station showed Ethan's grandfather, former Sheriff Samuel Hayes, standing at a podium in his old uniform. His weathered face projected grandfatherly concern, but his words dripped with calculated venom. "I've known Judge Johnson professionally for years," he said, his voice grave. "It pains me to see her allowing personal bias to tarnish the reputation of our fine police department. These accusations against my son and grandson, they follow a disturbing pattern of this family targeting law enforcement." The camera cut to clips of Ava at school, clearly chosen to make her look aggressive. "This young lady," Samuel continued, "has a history of confrontational behavior. Our community deserves better than these divisive tactics." Messages flooded Ava's phone. Some threatened violence. Others pleaded with her to stop causing trouble. Even supporters began to waver. "Ava, honey." Her history teacher, Mrs. Clark, caught her before first period. "Maybe it would be better to let this die down for your own safety." During lunch, Lucy Sanchez sat with her, looking worried. "My parents say we should stop hanging out," she admitted. "They're scared of getting involved." Judge Johnson faced similar pressure at the courthouse. Colleagues who had supported her suddenly had scheduling conflicts when she approached. A senior judge pulled her aside, speaking in careful terms about picking one's battles and considering one's future prospects. That evening, Ava found her mother in the kitchen, staring at a stack of photographs from the fire. The images showed clear pore patterns on the garage floor, evidence the investigators had ignored. "They're trying to break us," Ava said quietly, sitting beside her mother. Judge Johnson looked up, her eyes tired but determined. "They don't understand who they're dealing with. Half my text messages today told me to kill myself," Ava admitted. The other half said, "We deserve what's coming." Her mother's hand found hers across the table, squeezing tight. "Listen to me," Judge Johnson said firmly. "Your grandfather marched for civil rights. Your grandmother integrated her law firm. When people fought for justice, it was never easy. It was never safe." "I'm scared," Ava whispered. "I know, baby. I am too." Judge Johnson pulled out a fresh legal pad. "But being scared doesn't mean we stop. It means we're fighting something worth fighting." The next morning, they sat at their breakfast table, both exhausted but resolute. Judge Johnson gripped Ava's hand as they reviewed their case notes. "No matter what they throw at us," she declared, her voice strong despite everything, "we push forward. The truth doesn't burn." Ava nodded, drawing strength from her mother's unwavering determination. Outside their window, news vans were already gathering, but they barely noticed them anymore. They had work to do. Avia's eyes opened in the darkness, her alarm clock showing 4:47 a.m. Sleep had been restless, filled with images of flames and shadowy figures. But as she sat up in bed, determination pushed through her exhaustion. Today, they would start fighting back. She pulled on comfortable clothes and padded down to the kitchen, surprised to find her mother already there. Legal papers spread across the table. "Couldn't sleep either?" Ava asked, reaching for the coffee pot. Judge Johnson looked up, dark circles under her eyes. "Been reviewing precedents since 3. She gestured at the stack of folders. "The system expects us to give up. That's their playbook. Escalate until the victim backs down." Ava settled into a chair, warming her hands around her coffee mug. "Then let's change the game." For the next hour, they worked in focused silence. Ava pulled out her phone, methodically downloading and organizing every piece of evidence they'd gathered. Videos from the first hallway confrontation, screenshots of threatening texts, witness statements collected from brave students. The leaked body cam footage that showed Ray Hayes' aggressive arrest. "Mom," Ava said finally, her voice steady despite her racing heart, "I need to say something." Judge Johnson set down her pen, giving her daughter full attention. "They burned our garage. They're threatening our lives. Part of me wants to give in just to feel safe again." Ava's hands trembled slightly, but her voice grew stronger. "But if we quit now, what message does that send? That bullies win if they're scary enough. That justice only works for the powerful." She pulled up a recent text message, showing her mother, "Your kind don't belong here. Know your place." "This isn't just about Ethan anymore," Ava continued, "or Officer Hayes. It's about every kid who's been terrorized by bullies with connections. Every person who's been told to know their place. If we back down, we're telling them all to stay quiet and accept abuse." Judge Johnson reached across the table, gripping Ava's hand. "You sound like your grandmother. She used to say that courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about being terrified and standing firm anyway." "Exactly." Ava opened her laptop, showing the organized evidence files. "I've structured everything chronologically. Original incident, escalation pattern, the arrest, subsequent threats, the garage fire, with all supporting documentation cross-referenced." They spent the next several hours rehearsing testimony. Ava practiced staying calm while describing the harassment. Judge Johnson helped her prepare for hostile questioning, playing devil's advocate with increasing intensity. "And isn't it true," Judge Johnson challenged, mimicking an aggressive cross-examination, "that you provoked Mr. Hayes by filming him without consent?" "No," Ava answered firmly. "I began recording after he deliberately assaulted me in the hallway. Recording public interactions is legally protected, especially when documenting harassment." The morning stretched into afternoon. They ordered delivery for lunch, neither willing to leave the house. Ava noticed her mother making calls between practice sessions, speaking in low tones with colleagues she trusted. Around 3, Ava's phone buzzed. Lucy Sanchez had sent a new video, Ethan bragging in the locker room about how his family would destroy the Johnsons. "I can testify," Lucy's message read. "I'm scared, but I'm done being silent." More messages followed, other students offering statements, a teacher writing anonymously about systematic cover-ups of Ethan's behavior, the school janitor confirming he'd seen Ethan vandalizing Ava's locker. "They're finding their courage," Ava said, showing her mother the messages. Judge Johnson nodded. "Sometimes people just need to see someone else stand up first." As evening approached, Ava noticed something strange. The threatening messages that had bombarded her phone for days suddenly stopped. No new anonymous calls, no shadowy cars driving past their house. "They're quiet," she told her mother over dinner. "Too quiet. They're planning something for tomorrow." Judge Johnson agreed, "But we've planned better." They stayed up late, fine-tuning their strategy. Ava practiced keeping her voice steady while describing the garage fire. Judge Johnson rehearsed her own testimony about the pattern of intimidation and institutional obstruction. "Remember," Judge Johnson advised as they finally prepared for bed, "they'll try to make you angry tomorrow. They want you to look emotional, unstable. Your power is in staying composed while speaking truth." Ava hugged her mother tightly. "Like you always say in court, the truth has its own authority." Sleep came in fragments that night. Ava dreamed of courtrooms and burning buildings, of badges and handcuffs. But when her alarm sounded at 6:15 a.m., she felt strangely calm. She dressed carefully in a conservative blue blazer and skirt, pulling her hair back neatly. Downstairs, Judge Johnson wore her most formal black suit, her judge's authority displaced today by her role as a mother fighting for justice. They ate breakfast in companionable silence, reviewing their notes one final time. Ava packed their evidence files into her mother's leather briefcase, handling each document with care. These papers represented more than just their case. They carried the weight of every person who'd ever been told to stay quiet in the face of abuse. The sun was just breaking over the horizon as they stepped outside. News vans had already gathered at the end of their street, cameras tracking their movement. Ava stood straighter, remembering her mother's words about courage. They walked to the car together, neither speaking, but drawing strength from each other's presence. As Judge Johnson turned the key in the ignition, Ava touched the USB drive in her pocket containing their evidence. Everything they needed was ready. The courthouse loomed ahead as they drove downtown, its stone facade glowing in the morning light. More reporters waited on the steps, along with clusters of supporters and protesters. Ava spotted Ethan's grandfather in his old sheriff's uniform holding court with local media. Judge Johnson parked in her reserved space, turned off the engine, and faced her daughter. "Ready?" Ava nodded, gripping the briefcase handle. Together they stepped out into the cool morning air and began walking toward the courthouse steps, their footsteps perfectly in sync. The historic courthouse's main chamber was packed well beyond capacity, with people squeezed shoulder to shoulder on the wooden benches. Television cameras lined the back wall, their red lights blinking steadily. The morning sun streamed through tall windows, catching dust motes in golden beams. Ava sat straight back beside her mother, watching uniformed officers fill the left side of the room in a show of solidarity with Ray Hayes. On their right, she recognized students, teachers, and community members, some supportive, others hostile. The tension was thick enough to taste. Ray Hayes sat at the defendant's table, jaw clenched, in his pressed dress uniform. His attorney shuffled papers importantly, whispering in his ear. 2 rows behind them, Ethan slouched in his seat with a smirk, his retired sheriff grandfather's hand resting heavily on his shoulder. They radiated the confidence of people used to getting their way. The 3-person review panel entered, and the room rose. The head panelist, Commissioner Thompson, called the hearing to order with 3 sharp raps of his gavel. "Officer Raymond Hayes," Thompson began, "you are here to address serious allegations of misconduct, false arrest, and excessive force. How do you respond?" Ray stood, tugging at his collar. "These accusations are completely false, sir. I responded to a call about a violent student threatening my son. When I arrived, she was combative and refused to comply with lawful orders." Ava's hands tightened in her lap, but she kept her face neutral, just as they had practiced. Beside her, Judge Johnson made a small note. "And you maintain that your body camera malfunctioned during this incident?" Thompson asked. Yes, sir, equipment failure, but I followed all protocols. Then you'll be interested in seeing this footage, Thompson interrupted, nodding to the clerk. The lights dimmed. A projector hummed to life, displaying high-quality video from Ray's chest camera. The timestamp showed the date of Ava's arrest. The footage was damning. It showed Ray storming onto campus, shoving past protesting staff members. His breathing was heavy, aggressive. When he reached Ava, she stood calmly with her hands visible, asking what she had done wrong. Shut your mouth, Ray's voice snarled through the speakers. The camera captured him roughly grabbing her arm, twisting it behind her back as she gasped in pain. Please, I'm not resisting. Ava's voice was steady despite her obvious fear. Yeah, well, you should have thought about that before attacking my boy, Ray growled, cranking the handcuffs unnecessarily tight. Murmurs rose through the courtroom. Several officers shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The footage continued, showing Ray ignoring the principal's protests and Ava's request to call her mother. When the lights came up, Ray's face had lost its color. His attorney was frantically scribbling notes. Officer Hayes, Thompson's voice was ice cold, would you like to revise your statement about equipment failure? Before Ray could respond, his attorney stood. My client exercises his right to remain silent on that matter. Noted, Thompson turned to Ava. Miss Johnson, please take the stand. Ava rose smoothly, feeling hundreds of eyes following her movement. She was sworn in, then settled into the witness chair, adjusting her blazer. Please tell us in your own words about your first day at Brentwood High, Thompson prompted. Ava's voice carried clearly through the hushed room. I was checking my schedule when Ethan Hayes deliberately slammed into me in the hallway, knocking my books everywhere. When I didn't apologize to him, he became angry and started making racial comments. Did you record this incident? Yes, sir. Ava nodded to her mother, who handed a USB drive to the clerk. I began recording after the initial contact when his behavior became threatening. The video played, showing Ethan's sneering face as he loomed over Ava, spitting slurs. Students in the gallery whispered recognition of the scene. For the next hour, Ava methodically presented their evidence. Screenshots of anonymous threats scrolled across the screen. Photos documented her vandalized locker. Security footage showed Ethan following her between classes, intimidating other students who tried to speak to her. And then there was the fire, Ava said, her voice wavering slightly for the first time. Please elaborate. Thompson leaned forward. The night before this hearing was originally scheduled, someone poured gasoline in our garage and lit it. The police ruled it an electrical fire without investigation. Ava pulled out photos of the charred structure pointing to clear pour patterns. Our private investigator found this evidence of accelerant use. The room erupted in shocked whispers. Even some of Ray's supporting officers looked troubled. During this entire period, Ava continued, we received dozens of threatening messages. She played a voicemail. Back off or next time the fire won't just be in the garage. And how did school administrators respond to your complaints? Thompson asked. They didn't, sir. They suggested I was oversensitive and making trouble. One counselor advised me to try fitting in better. Ava's testimony continued detail by detail, incident by incident. She maintained her composure even as Ethan's grandfather tried to stare her down. When she described the psychological impact of being constantly watched and threatened, several jurors wiped their eyes. Finally, Ava concluded, I want to be clear, this isn't about revenge, it's about accountability. No student should fear going to school, no person should face violence for speaking up, and no officer should be able to abuse their power without consequences. A heavy silence fell as she finished speaking. Commissioner Thompson studied his notes for a long moment before looking up. This panel will take a 30-minute recess to review the evidence presented, he announced, rising. The gallery burst into conversation as the panel filed out. Ray's attorney huddled with him urgently. Ethan's smirk had vanished, replaced by a sickly pallor. His grandfather was already on his phone, speaking rapidly. Ava returned to her seat beside Judge Johnson, exhausted but proud. She had spoken her truth. Now they could only wait. The clerk's voice rang out across the hushed courtroom. All rise. Commissioner Thompson and the other panel members filed back in, their expressions unreadable. Ava's heart pounded as everyone settled back into their seats. The tension in the room was suffocating. Before we proceed, Thompson began, Judge Johnson has additional evidence to present regarding institutional misconduct. Your Honor, Judge Johnson rose gracefully, her heels clicking against the floor as she approached the podium. She carried a thick leather binder, her face set with determination. Members of the panel, she began, her voice clear and measured. What we've witnessed today goes far beyond a single incident of false arrest. I present evidence of systematic abuse of power and institutional protection of the Hayes family's misconduct. She opened her binder, removing a stack of documents. First, these are internal emails between school administrators discussing how to handle the Johnson situation. Note the repeated mentions of pressure from Sheriff Samuel Hayes to make this go away. The documents were distributed to the panel. Thompson's eyebrows rose as he read. Additionally, Judge Johnson continued, we have testimony from 3 former school employees who were terminated or transferred after reporting Ethan Hayes' behavior in previous years. She gestured to a group of people in the gallery who stood briefly. They're here today, finally ready to speak. Ray shifted uncomfortably in his chair. His attorney frantically flipped through papers. But perhaps most disturbing, Judge Johnson's voice hardened. Is this evidence of evidence tampering? She produced a technical report. A forensic analysis of the police department's body camera server shows multiple unauthorized access attempts the night of Ava's arrest, all traced to Officer Hayes' credentials. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Several officers in uniform looked at each other uneasily. We call Lucy Sanchez, junior class president, the clerk announced. A petite girl with glasses approached the stand, visibly nervous but determined. After being sworn in, she spoke clearly into the microphone. Ethan's bullying has been going on for years, she testified. Last semester, he pushed my brother down the stairs for sitting in his lunch spot. When we reported it, the principal said we must have misunderstood. The next day, Officer Hayes showed up at our house to discuss the false accusations against his son. More students followed, each account more damning than the last. A former basketball player described being kicked off the team after standing up to Ethan. A teacher's aide revealed overhearing administrators discussing how to minimize bullying reports involving the Hayes name. The panel then recalled Ethan to the stand. Gone was his earlier swagger. He slumped in the witness chair, eyes darting between his father and grandfather. Mr. Hayes, Thompson began, these testimonies directly contradict your earlier statement about having no history of disciplinary issues. Would you like to explain? They're all lying, Ethan snapped, but his voice cracked. They're just jealous because... Because what? Thompson interrupted. Because your family name protected you? Because your father's badge meant you never faced consequences? That's not, Ethan stumbled over his words. Did you or did you not deliberately provoke Miss Johnson on her first day? She was asking for it, Ethan blurted out, walking around like she owned the place, acting all superior. From the gallery, Sheriff Samuel Hayes suddenly stood up, face red with rage. This is outrageous. This whole hearing is a witch hunt against my family. I've served this community for 40 years, and I won't sit here while... You will sit down immediately, sir, Thompson commanded, or be removed. Like hell I will, the elder roared. I've made too many calls, pulled too many strings to let this little charade. He stopped abruptly, realizing what he'd admitted. The room went deathly quiet. Bailiff, Thompson ordered, please remove Sheriff Hayes and secure him for questioning regarding interference with an official proceeding. As security officers approached, Samuel Hayes' composure crumbled completely. You think this means anything? I still have friends in the state capitol. One phone call, and what? Judge Johnson's voice cut through his tirade. You'll abuse more power, threaten more families? The days of your family operating above the law are over. 2 bailiffs escorted the sputtering former sheriff out. Ethan sat frozen in the witness chair, all pretense of confidence shattered. Ray stared straight ahead, his jaw clenched so tight it twitched. The panel members conferred quietly among themselves, occasionally glancing at the mountain of evidence before them. After several tense minutes, Thompson straightened his papers and cleared his throat. This panel is prepared to issue its ruling, he announced. Ava reached for her mother's hand, squeezing it tightly. The entire room seemed to hold its breath, waiting for justice to finally be served. Commissioner Thompson adjusted his glasses, surveying the packed courtroom. The silence was absolute as he began to read from the panel's written decision. In the matter of misconduct allegations against Officer Ray Hayes, this panel has reached a unanimous decision based on overwhelming evidence. He paused, his tone growing stern. Officer Ray Hayes, please rise. Ray stood stiffly, his attorney's hand trembling slightly on his case files. This panel finds you guilty of multiple serious violations of department policy and criminal statutes. Your actions demonstrate a pattern of misconduct that cannot be ignored or excused. Thompson's voice carried clearly through the hushed room. Effective immediately, you are terminated from the Brentwood Police Department. Furthermore, we are forwarding criminal charges to the District Attorney's Office for false arrest, excessive force, and tampering with evidence. Ray's face drained of color. His attorney whispered urgently in his ear, but he seemed unable to process the words. Additionally, Thompson continued, your pension is forfeit, and you are permanently barred from serving in any law enforcement capacity in this state. You will surrender your badge and service weapon to the bailiff before leaving this courtroom. Murmurs rippled through the gallery. Several uniformed officers shifted uncomfortably in their seats, avoiding eye contact with their former colleague. As for Ethan Hayes, Thompson turned his attention to the teenager who seemed to shrink in his chair. While this panel's primary jurisdiction concerns Officer Hayes' conduct, we are compelled to address the broader pattern of abuse. This panel recommends immediate permanent expulsion from Brentwood High School with a formal recommendation to the district attorney to pursue juvenile charges for harassment, intimidation, and making threats. Ethan's mouth opened and closed wordlessly. His carefully maintained facade of privilege and power crumbled visibly. Furthermore, Thompson's voice grew even more severe. Regarding former Sheriff Samuel Hayes' actions, this panel is issuing an immediate subpoena for all communications related to his interference in this matter. His admission of using political influence to obstruct justice will be fully investigated. The commissioner shuffled his papers, continuing with methodical precision. The panel is also recommending a comprehensive civil rights investigation into Brentwood School District's handling of discriminatory harassment and selective enforcement of disciplinary policies. The Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights will be notified today. Ava sat perfectly still, watching justice unfold with quiet satisfaction. Her mother's hand remained steady on her shoulder. To ensure transparency, Thompson added, all findings and evidence from this hearing will be made public, with appropriate redactions to protect student privacy. The systemic nature of these violations demands nothing less than full disclosure. He turned to address Ray directly. Mr. Hayes, surrender your badge and weapon now. The bailiff approached Ray, who moved as if in a daze. His trembling fingers fumbled with his badge, nearly dropping it. The metallic clank of his service weapon being placed on the bailiff's tray echoed through the silent room. Miss Johnson? Thompson turned to Ava, his tone softening slightly. This panel commends your courage in coming forward and your persistence in seeking justice despite significant pressure and threats. Your actions have exposed serious problems that required addressing. Ava nodded gracefully, maintaining her composure even as relief flooded through her. This hearing is concluded. Thompson struck his gavel once, the sound sharp and final. The room erupted in controlled case. Reporters rushed for the doors, phones already pressed to their ears. Ray's attorney hurriedly stuffed papers into his briefcase, speaking rapidly to his shell-shook client. Ethan fled the room, nearly tripping over his own feet. Several of Ava's classmates who had testified approached her, offering quiet congratulations and supportive smiles. The young officer who had provided the body camera footage caught her eye from across the room and gave a subtle nod of respect. Judge Johnson gathered their materials calmly, her movements precise and unhurried. Let's give them a moment to clear out, she murmured to Ava. No need to fight through the crowd. They watched as Ray was escorted out a side door, his shoulders slumped in defeat. The police officers who had come to support him filed out silently. Their earlier solidarity evaporated in the face of irrefutable evidence. News crews set up their equipment outside, preparing to broadcast the historic decision. Through the courthouse windows, Ava could see the gathering crowd of community members waiting to hear the outcome. Ready? Judge Johnson asked after several minutes. Ava stood, smoothing her skirt. Ready. They walked together toward the main entrance, their footsteps echoing in the now empty corridor. The heavy doors swung open, and Ava blinked in the bright sunlight. For a moment, everything seemed to pause. Then the crowd erupted in applause. Students, parents, teachers, and citizens who had followed the case. They clapped and cheered as Ava emerged, signs reading "Justice Prevails" and "Stand Against Abuse of Power" waved above the crowd. Lucy Sanchez, the junior class president who had testified, started a chant. "Thank you, Ava. Thank you, Ava." Ava felt tears prick at her eyes, not from fear or frustration this time, but from the overwhelming sense of vindication. All those months of documentation, of standing firm, of refusing to back down, they had finally led to this moment of undeniable, transparent justice. Reporters surged forward, microphones extended, but Judge Johnson smoothly guided Ava through the crowd. The applause continued, washing over them in waves of support and appreciation. Ava spotted some of her teachers in the crowd, no longer looking away, but meeting her eyes with respect and, in some cases, apologetic smiles. The weight that had pressed on her chest since that first hallway confrontation finally lifted completely. She stood straight and tall, letting the community witness her dignity and victory. The next morning, sunlight streamed through Ava's bedroom window, painting warm stripes across her comforter. She sat up slowly, taking in the peaceful quiet, so different from the tense mornings of recent months. Her phone buzzed with supportive messages instead of threats, a welcome change that still felt slightly surreal. As she got ready for school, but caught her reflection in the mirror, she looked different somehow, not older exactly, but more assured. The weight of fear had lifted from her shoulders, replaced by quiet confidence. Judge Johnson was already in the kitchen, coffee in hand, scanning news headlines on her tablet. "The story's everywhere," she said, looking up with a smile. "You've started something important, Ava." "We did it together," Ava replied, grabbing a piece of toast. The kitchen TV played footage from yesterday's hearing, showing Ray Hayes surrendering his badge, while reporters analyzed the significance of the panel's decision. The drive to school felt different too. No mysterious cars followed them. No need to take alternate roads. Students milling outside Brentwood High turned as Ava's car pulled up, but their stares held respect rather than hostility. "Have a good day," Judge Johnson said warmly. "I'm so proud of you." Ava stepped out into the morning air, head high. Lucy Sanchez rushed over immediately, wrapping her in a tight hug. "Ava, have you seen the news? They're talking about making policy changes because of you." Other students gathered around, offering congratulations and sharing stories about watching the hearing's outcome. Even those who had stayed silent during Ethan's reign of intimidation now spoke up about how inspiring her stand had been. "I can't believe you faced down Officer Hayes like that," a freshman girl said admiringly. "You were so brave in that courtroom." "The truth was on my side," Ava replied simply. "Sometimes that's all you need." Walking through the halls felt surreal. Where there had been whispers and hostile glares, now she received smiles and respectful nods. Teachers who had looked away during Ethan's harassment now made a point of greeting her warmly. During first period, Principal Thorne's voice crackled over the intercom. "Attention students and staff, please join me in congratulating Ava Johnson, who has been selected to receive the Governor's Youth Courage Award for her role in exposing misconduct and standing up against injustice." Applause broke out in every classroom. Ava's classmates turned to beam at her as the principal continued. "Additionally, the Brentwood Community Foundation has established the Ava Johnson Scholarship for Justice, which will provide annual support to minority students pursuing careers in law and public service." Ava felt tears prick at her eyes, quickly blinking them away. This was about more than just her now. It was about creating lasting change. Between classes, her phone buzzed with a message from her mother. "Governor's office just called. They want to present your commendation at the State House next week. Your courage is inspiring people across the state." The local news van was still parked outside at lunch, reporters hoping for follow-up interviews. Lucy and several other students formed a protective circle around Ava as they walked to the cafeteria. "You don't have to shield me anymore," Ava said with a small laugh. "The threats are over." "We know," Lucy replied, "but we should have stood with you from the beginning. We're making up for lost time." In the cafeteria, Ava noticed several empty seats where Ethan's former friends usually sat. The power dynamics had shifted completely, and his old supporters seemed unsure of their place in the new order. Her phone kept lighting up with notifications as news outlets shared updates. The governor's official statement praised her extraordinary courage in the face of systemic intimidation and called her an example of the change one brave voice can create. During the last period, Ava's government teacher asked her to speak to the class about standing up to authority. She stood at the front of the room looking at her peers' attentive faces. "It's not about being fearless," she explained carefully. "It's about not letting fear stop you from doing what's right. Everyone has the power to speak up. Sometimes they just need to see someone else do it first." After school, Judge Johnson picked her up for a scheduled press conference at the courthouse. They sat in the car for a moment, gathering their thoughts. "You know," her mother said softly, "when I first took the judge position, I worried about how it might affect you. I never imagined you'd end up teaching me about courage." Ava squeezed her hand. "You taught me first. I just applied the lessons." They walked up the courthouse steps together, where reporters and cameras waited. The questions came rapid fire. "Ava, what message do you have for other students facing intimidation?" "Judge Johnson, how will this case influence your future rulings? What changes do you hope to see in the school system?" Ava stepped to the microphone, her voice clear and steady. This was never just about one bully or one corrupt officer. It was about standing up to a system that protected them. Change happens when we refuse to be silenced. The cameras flashed as she continued. "To anyone facing similar struggles, you are stronger than you know. Document everything. Find allies, trust in justice, and never let anyone convince you to accept abuse as normal." Judge Johnson stood proudly beside her daughter as Ava delivered her final statement to the assembled crowd. "We're stronger than any bully. Fear only works when we let it control us. The truth is more powerful than any badge or threat." Cameras clicked rapidly, capturing the image of mother and daughter standing together on the courthouse steps. No longer victims or targets, but champions of justice who had transformed their community through unwavering courage and determination. If you enjoyed the story, leave a like to support my channel and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. On the screen, I have picked two special stories just for you. Have a wonderful day.